I want to talk about the Carnival Hub Chat function. I had an interesting conversation with someone the other day, at Teppanyaki actually, and we were talking about the Hub Chat. And so this has been my first cruise that I've been on with anyone else since the Hub Chat function has come out where I didn't have it. And I have to say, it's kind of been a pain. I think that anyone who bulks at $5, that's all it is. It's $5 per cruise, regardless of duration, per person, to activate the chat function in the app so that you can chat with anyone else on the ship who has the chat app. And it is absolutely worth it. Now, Sam didn't want to get it, and since he's the only person I'm traveling with, it makes no sense for me to get it and have no one to talk to. But it's $5. This is a 15-day cruise. So we saved 33 cents per day. And I think that it cost us various experiences. Sam or I would be out somewhere and no idea what the other person's doing, when they're coming back, what they're up to. There was a couple of times where I know there was at least one time where I didn't know if he had returned from the port yet or not. And if he had had the chat app, I could have just said, like, hey, I'm back. Or, are you on board yet? And we've done that on previous cruises. And so I think he went to MDR, but I assumed he was still in the port, so I went to Guy's. And so I think he was a little annoyed that I didn't join him for dinner, but I had no idea he was on the ship, much less that he wanted to have dinner together. And so for 33 cents a day for this sailing, that could have been avoided. Similar thing, yesterday, he wanted to go to lunch, and so I had just come back from eating lunch on Lido, and I come into the cabin, and he's like, oh, hey, how about you come join me for lunch at MDR? The menu looks great. And I hadn't thought to look at the lunch menu for whatever reason. I was just craving Guys, so I went for Guys. Simple thing, right? But he'd been planning and wanting to go to lunch. He hadn't mentioned it previously. I don't know when he decided. It might have been a little bit before that. But I said to him, oh, I just had lunch. And he's like, oh, but look at the menu. There's all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I would have really enjoyed that. But I just had lunch. And he was like, no, but like you like this, and you like this, and you like that. Why don't you come along and join me for lunch? And I'm like, yeah, had I known 20 minutes ago, that would have been my plan. But I just ate. And he's like, oh, but this would be healthy for you, and this thing here, like that would help with your medical condition right now. Like, you should really go to lunch. And I'm like, look, what you're not understanding is I am not hungry. I am full. I ate on Lido on my own because I had no earthly clue if you were even on the ship or what you wanted to do. But had I known and had we communicated for the low cost of 33 cents per day, I could have had maybe a lovely lunch experience. Not that I didn't enjoy Guys, but I've had Guys a few times on this sailing. There was some stuff they were offering at lunch that day I don't think I've seen before or since. And so I kind of feel like I missed out as a result of that. And so I am now a strong advocate for the Carnival Hub Chat. It's a fantastic deal, even on a 4-day cruise. It's $1.25. Isn't it worth $1.25 per day per person to be able to communicate with the rest of the people you're sailing with? If you're on a solo cruise, okay, don't get it. There's no one to chat with, unless maybe you meet and make some new friends at dining with strangers at MDR. That makes perfect sense. But if you're sailing with anyone you know, just get the Hub app. Chat function. It's $5. Somewhere between 33 cents or $1.25 per day is a great deal. And you know what? If you're bulking at $5, and I don't like to be this guy. People say this stuff all the time, like, oh, if you don't tip $100 every day to your steward or something, you can't afford cruises, blah, blah, blah. People say that in our Facebook group every now and then. Not many people. It's a rare thing, but it's weird. It comes up every now and then. Most of that community is fantastic. Over, I think, 350,000 people. Go check that out on Facebook. It's fantastic. I'm doing a bad job of selling the group to you. The group's normally lovely. But every now and then there's these people who are like, well, if you can't afford specialty dining every night, then you can't afford a cruise. And that is obviously something I disagree with. This channel, this podcast, this whole Vacation Impossible effort I make, it's about showing people how you can travel more cheaply so you can do it more often. That is a huge value of mine. Travel is valuable. If you can do it more, that's better. And one of the ways we do that is by saving money so we can afford to do it more often. I am all about that. But $5 for chat is such a small amount of money that saving it gets you virtually nothing, and it's cutting off your nose to spite your face because you're going to be potentially frustrated at the lack of communication, lack of being able to find people to check in, whatever. It's such a simple thing. And so for just $5, I mean, come on, and so I did have an interesting conversation at Teppanyaki with a fellow named Gene. Lovely, lovely guy. Very nice guy. He's from Tennessee, I believe. And he was like, oh, I hate how they nickel and dime you, like that $5 for the chat app. And I'm in the middle of my experience of like being frustrated at a lack of information and communication, being able to find and communicate with people I'm with. And so I'm strongly feeling in the other direction, but I'm trying to keep an open mind. I'm like, okay, if I can understand this better, maybe I can address this better, talk about it. So I say like, oh, well, what makes you say that? And he's like, well, I paid so much for this cruise, and like the fact that the first thing they do is ask for $5 more, it just feels ridiculous and petty and bad experience, and it feels cheap. And so I was like, okay, from that point of view, I can kind of understand. So I was like, let me ask you this, when did you start cruising? And he's like, oh, it was like a year or two before the pandemic. And that's when it clicked for me. The difference between his perspective and mine. My perspective, I started cruising in 2013. There was no app. There was free Wi-Fi where you could download, maybe a PDF of the fun times. I don't think they had menus up back then. It was very little, stuff. John Heel did a blog that you could read that was free. He doesn't do that anymore. But other than that, it was just a very limited version of the Carnival website on the free Wi-Fi, a little bit of stuff, maybe a ship map or something. Not much. And then, when I was sailing on the Glory, they were beta testing the app. And they gave us free chat. And so it didn't work perfect, but, we were kind of part of that beta test. And it was free. And then after that, once they kind of perfected it, in air quotes, I am going to talk about the flaws of the chat. Don't get me wrong. There are flaws. It's not perfect. On subsequent cruises, I was like, well, okay, for $5 more, I can get this thing that I did not have before. And so for me, that's a great value. That's a huge value. Strong recommend. Get the chat function anytime you sail with anyone who isn't you. Anyone in addition to yourself. Just do it. Just do it. You can thank me later. But from his perspective, because he just thought it was something that should have been available, because he never cruised when it didn't exist. And so from his perspective, it was like just this nickel and diming. It's like, well, they know that it's a thing. Why don't they build it into the price and just give it to you? And there's an argument to be made for that. Carnival, if you want to go in that direction, I'm fine with it, because then I wouldn't run into these same issues that I ran into today. Or on this cruise, I should say. But from my perspective, hey, you're having this great experience. We can make it a little easier and a little better for you for just $5 more. What do you think? I'm like, sure. And so I think that also gets into issues of like loss aversion and stuff like that. I think he expected there to be a free chat function. And then when it wasn't there, he felt like he was losing something that he had expected and was somewhat entitled to. And I don't fault him for that position, because Carnival is great, but they don't always do the greatest job of communicating everything, because there's so much to know. It's not necessarily their fault, but to their guests. That's part of why we're here, this podcast, this YouTube channel, and the other things that we do on Facebook and our Facebook group and everything is to get more information before you go so you can manage those expectations. And so he felt like, we're going to put this little thing that you were expecting behind this little padlock, and if you give us extra money, then you can have it. And that was like the first thing he encountered when he got on board. So I can appreciate where he's coming from, but I think that if you sit down and think about between 33 cents and $1.25 a day, you can stay in touch with the people that you're traveling with to know, oh, hey, we're all going to go to the Lido Pool. How about you join us? We're headed to the Whirlpool, the hot tub, Serenity. Hey, what are you thinking about dinner? And that way, it's freeing. It's freeing. You don't have to leave notes and stick to the plan. You can change your mind. You don't have to constantly be in the cabin or report back to the cabin to coordinate or call the cabins or whatever. You check it when you want to. It's so fantastic. It's worth every bloody penny. And you know what? This is going to make me unpopular. Come at me in the comments if you disagree. I don't care. Carnival, you can raise the price and I'll still buy it. And I don't want you to. But it is so intensely valuable that I think it's that important. It will charge your Sail and Sign account $5. If you have OBC, it will obviously deduct against the OBC, particularly if it's the first thing you do, and if you haven't spent all your OBC yet. And that's another thing that was kind of funny, because Sam was trying to save these $5, but he has like $250 of OBC on the sailing because of his stock credit. So that's further why I didn't understand that reluctance, but I respected his choice. You gotta accept people as they are. You can't send pictures to each other. You can't send files. There's some limited emojis, so it has some limits, but it's still pretty good. So let's talk now that I've done my frantic sales pitch for the chat plan about its flaws. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. The messages don't always deliver instantly. However, I'm not entirely certain that that's the flaw of the app. One thing I've noticed with my phone is that every now and then it might actually disconnect me from the Wi-Fi. And it doesn't do a great job of letting me know about that. And so it could be that maybe I've disconnected, and so that's why I haven't gotten the most recent message, or my message didn't send. Sometimes there can be a delay. And sometimes the delay can be substantial. And the app has gone through different iterations. Your experience is likely to vary on different ships, and especially over time, and potentially different devices. But one thing that I've taken to doing with some of my traveling companions in the chat function of the Hub app is we would put our own timestamps on it if it was something that was time sensitive in a sense. So like, let's say that we're going to go to the hot tub, but maybe we're only going to go to the hot tub for like half an hour. And so we could say like, hey, we're headed to the hot tub. And then I might just in parentheses put like 1:30 p.m. And that's how you can get around that delay function. I mean, it doesn't mean that the message gets delivered faster or read faster, but at least when people see it, they'll have a slightly more accurate conception of when the message was sent. And of course, as with everything, stay on ship's time all the time. But that's mainly the flaw. And sometimes if you've got a group chat and like somebody might log out or refresh the app, clear their cache, going back to that chat can sometimes be problematic. So you might have to create a new group chat to make that work. That was, I think, an issue we had, on the celebration. So it has some flaws. The messages can be delayed. The timestamps might not be reliable. And sometimes group chats can get a little hinky, might drop someone from the group chat, and re-adding them might not work. Those, I think, are relatively minor issues. I do hope that they correct them and address them with subsequent updates and improvements to their network. But versus the olden days where we didn't have the chat, it's just so much better. It's just so much better. And I think a big part of cruising for me is relaxing and less stress. And so being connected to people, they say, oh, you got unplugged to whatever. You're traveling with people. And so being connected to them reduces stress. It reduces misunderstanding. It reduces frustration. And more importantly, it reduces missed opportunities. And so I'm now, like, because this is my first time not having it. And it is night and day, and it is not an addiction. It's not like I gotta, it is kind of fun sometimes. We're like, oh, you won't believe what I just saw. Or, hey, I'm at the comedy club, saved you a seat. We used to do that all the time. And then the person might be like, oh, that's great, I'm coming. Or, oh, not really feeling it, or I saw the show already. Please give that seat away. Those sorts of things. So many examples. We're headed up to Lido. Oh, I'm not feeling great. Can you grab me something? Sam himself, the man who did not want chat on this cruise, hurt his ankle on the celebration, and there were a couple times where he messaged me. He was like, hey, I'm on Lido, but like my ankle really hurts. Could you come and get me a drink? And so I went up there, got him a drink, brought it over to him. And there was another time where he was recovering in his cabin, and he really wanted a Reuben sandwich from the deli. And so he messaged me, and he was just like, oh, hey, man, like, I don't want room service. Could you just go to the deli, get me a Reuben? I'm like, no problem. I was all too happy to be, Uber Eats for Sam on that trip. But without chat, he couldn't have done any of it. And his philosophy is only if you have people in different cabins does it make sense, and only to coordinate for mealtime. Strong disagree. If you're traveling with anyone that you don't hate, get the chat. Please, don't screw yourself on your cruise. Don't make it worse, make it better. Spend the $5. We will help you find ways to save that $5 elsewhere. If there's something I'm missing about the chat plan, let me know. Comment below. If you disagree with my take on the chat plan, let me know why that is. And if it's just a protest against the nickel and diming, they say forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. And so you're basically there flogging yourself saying, see, Carnival, this isn't cool. Send them an email. Comment on John Heald's Facebook page or something. There's other ways to let them know. Tell them in the survey. But don't torture yourself, your friends, and your family as a protest against Carnival's nickel and diming. Strong disagree. That's your philosophy. There's better places you can do it. Just don't go to the steakhouse. I think that's what I'm doing. That's my stand against nickel and diming. You can go to a hidden deck to get away from people, and if you've got your phone and you've got chat, it's not like you're ignoring people or you're hiding. The deck is hidden. By being there, you're not. You can still receive messages. Someone say, hey, what's up? What are you doing? Oh, I'm on the hidden deck. I'm on deck 7 forward. What's up? You come hang out with me, or what do you want to go do?